They promise not to cheat, but they'll do their own inspections, thank you. And we'll have to listen to them and see if whether or not they're following the law. So here's the bottom line. This deal goes in, nothing changes. Iran will have a nuclear weapon in less than 10 years.
We are very confident that this very aggressive inspection regimen that's in place in the deal going forward for future is the strongest ever peacefully negotiated. So I think what you're seeing is a reaction to the notion that Iran will just get free license to self-inspect. And as I said, the Director General of the IAEA himself made it clear that that's not true.
Well, Fox obtained the actual document, the agreement called Separate Agreement 2 between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the IAEA, and it deals with this arrangement on the verification and investigation of Parchin, a military facility in Iran. It says Iran will provide photos, video, environmental samples to the IAEA. Iran will provide that, and each time it says that, it says taking into account military concerns. Iran will technically look at this with its own equipment, Iran's authenticated equipment, and also the Parchin visit will be joined by the IAEA director after all of this is through. The IAEA Director General and the Deputy will visit the facility at the end of this back and forth as Iran provides all of the photos, video, environmental samples from the facility. This is actually all in the document as it's laid out. So what about all of this? Let's bring in our panel. Syndicated columnist George Will, Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. George.
Well, the first progressive Democratic president, Woodrow Wilson, famously went off to the Versailles Conference with 14 points, the first of which was open covenants openly arrived at. It boggles the mind that almost anyone can vote for this thing when they're really buying a pig in a poke because they have not been shown the documents. These same people in Congress who said, well, we can't tell you whether we're for or against the trade agreements yet because we haven't seen the final documents. These are people who are now preparing to sign on to something that they simply haven't seen. Now, the State Department spokesman we just saw suggested that what we call national technical means of verification, satellites and other things, might be a substitute for more rigorous on-site inspection. If so, why were we negotiating so hard all the time about these? It doesn't square.
Yeah, and obviously you're talking about a country that hid facilities inside mountains, so they obviously had some history, and the past, judging by, Chuck, what we know about their past, they have to come clean about it as part of this deal, and that's really a question mark as well.
Well, let's be clear what this piece is about with the IAEA. This is not about anything else except the past. It's about what went on at Parchin 10, 12 years ago. And the administration is essentially...
Or what's going on there now.
No. This is about, as far as I understand the purpose of this separate agreement, it is so that they can establish a baseline and account for whatever military-related nuclear activities Iran had been doing in the past, which is, of course, important to understanding the future. But it's interesting how the administration is approaching this. They're saying two things. They're saying, one, don't worry because it's ironclad and it's good. The IAEA knows what it's doing. You can trust them even though the document, leaks notwithstanding, isn't public. And over here they're also saying it doesn't really matter that much. That's the other thing that's being said, is that this doesn't really affect the fundamental validity of the deal. And I have to say, I agree with George. If you're somebody who's got to vote on this in Congress, they're asking you to take a big risk. They're asking you to believe those two things without really being able to know everything you would want to know.
Here is the Corker language in the bill, the Iran bill that passed, and this is the Senate language, the House passed it. This sets up this whole thing of this vote approving the deal. The term agreement and all related materials and annexes means the agreement itself and any additional materials related thereto, including annexes, appendices, side agreements, implementing materials, documents, guidance, technical and other understandings, and any related agreements, whether entered into or implemented prior to the agreement or to be entered into or implemented in the future. Meaning, they have to see it all. They haven't seen what we obtained.
Right. You don't have to go back to Woodrow Wilson to talk about openly agree that in the Corker Amendment, as you said, the administration is required to turn over everything, including side agreements, and it says elsewhere, whether contracted with Iran with third parties, which is exactly what this is. But Chuck, as to your point, this is only about the past. Well, the past extends until yesterday. This isn't about what happened 12 years ago. We have no idea what's happened in the last 12 years. The whole idea of this is to know where the Iranians were and where the Iranians now are on this weaponization. And what happens at Parchin, it sounds esoteric, it's quite simple. They were developing nuclear detonation devices. If you want to build a nuke, you need three things: the fissile material, uranium enrichment, a ballistic missile where you deliver it, but in between you have to find a way to explode the fissile material. That's what happened in Parchin. The reason the administration has promised year after year that we would have to learn everything about the previous research here, meaning up until yesterday, is because that's the key to developing a nuclear weapon. The idea that you can get this by technical means, by national technical means, by satellite, is simply ridiculous. We have had satellite images of Parchin up until yesterday, and all you can see is they're running around with a lot of tractors, and they are obviously changing and covering up things. The only reason that we have this, the only reason the administration said that it was a red line, is because the only way to know what they did there, as a way to have a baseline and to prevent more of it, is to have inspectors on the ground. This is asking Alex Rodriguez to do his own drug test and to phone in the results.
This is what the IAEA director said in a statement, saying, "I am disturbed by statements suggesting that the IAEA has given responsibility for nuclear inspections to Iran. Such statements misrepresent the way in which we will undertake this important verification work." I mean, this document says Iran will provide to the agency photos. Iran will provide to the agency videos. Iran will provide to the agency environmental samples. It's Iran's equipment. And then as a courtesy by Iran, a visit by the Director General at the end, and a roundtable technical discussion between Iran and the agency. That's what this document says.
Well, one wonders if this man has seen it, or if he says there is a different way of parsing those remarkably clear sentences to come to a different conclusion than the one I think the four of us have.
Well, I mean, there's one question I would have, which is the AP report was talking about a draft document. I don't know if you have the same, so what he may be hanging on is that this is some kind of, it's been changed since then. But I think we have to be very clear here. This isn't like, I do think the IAEA is telling the truth when it says this is what we do with everybody. The point is not everybody is Iran.
Yeah. Last word.
Well, as I said last night, the guy who was for 5 years the deputy director of the IAEA said that he has never seen such an agreement, and his job was to supervise the inspections. So he knows, and he says this is extremely unique. Well, that's a redundancy. This has never happened. It is scandalous, and the administration is either lying about this or deceiving us, because I don't see any other explanation unless they show us the real document. If that was only a draft, show us.
Next up, Joe Biden gets some good numbers while Donald Trump and Jeb Bush get in some good shots at each other, and the investigation into those emails continues.